All right, welcome to Text and Image Don't Match Up with Cathy Mayer. Cathy is a cartoonist and educator. Her comics have been published in the Rumpus and the Florida Review. Her graphic novella, The Last Time I Saw Deborah, is out with Go Press Girl. She co-runs The Gutter, a newsletter for comics creators to share and submit work. Super happy to have you all here today. And Cathy, take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, Julian. Happy to be here. I see Anne, who introduced me to BlueStube, which I'm grateful for. And I'm excited to talk to you all, maybe rant a little bit about this thing that happens in comics that I love. And even if you're not a comics person or cartoonist by trade or by hobby, I think it's just a cool and generative way to come up with ideas for any sort of creative field. So definitely writing, but anything where you're coming up with a different way to tell a story. So I'll just dive right in. Okay. I'm gonna pull up just my notes. And can I see a thumbs up if we can all see this slideshow? Awesome, great. So I'll be talking about when the image and text in something doesn't go together and why I think it can be pretty awesome. I'll start with a story about a bag of Chex Mix that I was sitting and staring at for a long time because I was on a long flight. And I noticed that on the back of the Chex Mix, there was an informational graphic that explained the names of all of the characters in Chex Mix. And I was just pretty struck by how literal it was, that there was really no room for imagination when you're taking a look at these. Square Pretzel is aptly named Square Pretzel, even though I'd always referred to it as Window Pretzel. And I just thought that was such an interesting thing to be on the back of this bag. And I was wondering what it might look like if somebody came in and shook things up a little bit. So I gave these Chex Mix stars new names, new personalities, new identities, and sort of imagined what I could do if I was creating like a yearbook page or a meme or something. And while that was a lot of fun, and it's always fun, I think, to break the association between text and image, I still felt like I could push it a little bit further as someone who is drawn to storytelling. So I brought in a more narrative line of text. And while this may not be like an award-winning comics panel, it does sort of become a graphic narrative of sorts. And it does feel a little bit different than the yearbook type thing I had done before. And I liked sort of playing with, I don't know, maybe like forcing a narrative onto an image that didn't necessarily have one before. And what that does to both, what that does to the sentence and what that does to the picture that I messed with. So it turns out that this is a tool that comics artists, that cartoonists use a lot and have been doing for a long time. I'm going to start with a pretty well-known cartoonist, Chris Ware, who does, I feel like, pretty traditional looking comics. And in this one has sort of used the strategy I was talking about by showing or by using pretty straightforward narrative where he's reflecting on his grandparents' house in this short memoir piece, but pairing it with like this very dramatic superhero imagery, which brings a lot more questions, I think, than answers. Any like why in describing this memory with his grandfather does he draw this sort of superhero character? Why is the lighting so dramatic? What is making this story feel like it needs to be told this way? A more straightforward example of mismatching this text and image is in this comic, in which the cartoonist actually just used found text from Google image searches and paired it with found images from an old Thai comic book and placed them together to create sort of a new, totally unsettling narrative. So the cartoonist, Matt Madden, talks about this as being sort of an example of a poetry comic, which is basically like a comic that doesn't have a super narrative heavy structure. But he says that this comic enacts poetry's ability to suggest meaning while evading it at the same time. And the technique used to do that is the dissonance between words and images. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to look at this tactic, which is it can present something with meaning, but also not really answer why this artist has put this text with these images. A more succinct way to put all of this that I think is captured totally well, and we could just like end this slideshow right here and just look at these 2 pages, is in this comic by a friend of mine, Becca Shuckett, who's also a cartoonist. And I'm going to read this one out loud. Okay, hear me out. There's a thing that happens. I don't know the name, and I can't think of an example right now. A thing in comics when the text and the image don't match up. Like a non sequitur or a type of dissonance, seeing a thing and not knowing what it is. Our brains try to connect everything. We look for patterns where there aren't any, and we create them anyway. We try so hard to tell stories. Does this feel like a secret you need to uncode? So Becca gets exactly what I'm talking about here. Even when the images and text have seemingly no correlation on the surface, our brains are always searching for a narrative. And in the process of searching, it does something that's super interesting. It creates a third narrative. And so I've wondered why there isn't a name for this when this happens. And while I haven't yet encountered an official name, I have temporarily designated it TAIDMU. Text and image don't match up. So I'll be using TAIDMU to refer to this happening from now on. So I've also noticed that cartoonists and comics artists and visual artists will use this for different reasons. It's not necessarily always to be comedic or surprising. There are so many different ways that TAIDMU can be used. And I've tried to give these different ways their own terminologies that are all totally made up and not have no academic credibility, but feel free to use them if you'd like. And I'll show a few examples, but there are so many more artists that use this than just who I'm sharing today. So this strategy will call direct opposition. And it's when the text and the imagery are totally just at odds with each other, just in total conflict, usually for comedic effect. So in this image, the man was left incapacitated. He was forced to calm down. He seemed content. And I think just the way that those three lines are drawn on that face that's supposed to represent a whole person, paired with he seemed content, does exactly that. Tonal disparity is when sort of the imagery creates an entirely different and often opposing tone to what the text is saying. So in this collection of comics, Jillian Tamaki is sort of commenting on like beauty, the beauty industry and marketing campaigns. And so the text here reads like an infomercial, almost. A cleanser, a toner, a moisturizer. These three things are the backbone of the Clare-free system. And paired with these like very shadowy occult figures is honestly awesome. I really laugh when I see this page. Narrative disparity. So a little different than tonal disparity, where the text is actually telling an entirely different story than what the visuals are saying. So the visuals here are showing kind of these two absurd creatures kind of violently going at it. While the text is very casual and conversational. And maybe we don't know why those two are so different until we read the remainder of the comic. And it creates this kind of interesting suspense and desire for us to want to connect those two things. We have narrative cacophony, which is just maybe totally evading meaning by pairing imagery and text from totally wildly different places to create sort of more of a feeling of an unsettling feeling, or like maybe the story has gone off the rails a little bit. In this one, there seems to be like an award show amongst a bunch of desert creatures, possibly. And TAIDMU, the last few examples we've looked at have been, I would say, pretty comedic examples, but you can definitely use this tool to evoke a more emotional tone, or a more introspective and reflective piece as well. So in this example, Tommy Parrish is using sort of an internal monologue and pairing it with seemingly abstract imagery that we're not really able to pin down. It turns out that these little portholes are pieces of this character getting ready for their day and taking a shower and sort of doing mundane things, but taken out of context and paired with this internal monologue, they create sort of like a totally different feeling that is like more even more internal, because we're not able to really identify what is in these circles, whether it's a memory or a pattern, or maybe something that we haven't met yet in the narrative. So another way of pairing internal monologue with images that aren't so literal is by portraying a character or somebody doing things externally with internal monologue, which I find very compelling. In this book, a lot of the things that are pictured are just something that this character is doing with their day, but the text, which is translated down at the bottom, is totally emotion-based and happening inside, even though this character might be like at the shore of a wide ocean or here at the aquarium. And I feel like in these, the text and image could stand alone together, but they create a third sort of feeling when they're paired. So in this last example, it's sort of similar to internal temporality, but alternate reality, what I'm posing as alternate reality, is blending planes in time for emotional effect. So in this comic, Sophia reflects on a baby that she didn't end up having and what her life would have been like. I'm going to read this one. I still think about you, babe. You'd be walking, you'd be talking, you'd be starting school, you'd be watching cartoons while sitting in my lap, but we wouldn't be here. We'd be with him. I'd be sad and scared and hurt, and I'd be a failure, but you would be perfect in every possible way. So in this, well, the imagery is showing the narrator going about her day, and it's pretty eventless. Without the text, it would just look like someone walking around and getting on the subway. The narrative causes us to sort of imagine this third space in which the baby exists and is maybe sitting in that subway car with her, which I just, this one really, I find powerful. So I have an example close read, close read, boring. Okay, but we'll get through this. But I think it's fun to sort of just take a look at one page specifically and examine how it's working, how the TAIDMU is working for us here. This is from that earlier collection I talked about by Jillian Tamaki, and this is about sort of a made-up social media app. I'll read the text. She was fascinated to see the profiles diverge, even if one Jenny's life seemed as relentlessly ordinary as her own. Jenny said, "Should I grow my hair out?" Jenny watched, "Cat falls off slide." Jenny watched, "Top Gun." Jenny commented on Winnie's post, "Gorgeous." Jenny said, "Bored." Okay, I would love maybe in the chat, or if you want to unmute and just share out. Firstly, what does the imagery make you think of? Or what do you see in just the visuals only? I'll start out by sharing, I feel like I'm seeing more natural imagery. Totally. A forest, wildlife, jungle. There's like vines.
Yeah, a garden, and also from a very close point of view, like almost from an animal or a bug's point of view, because you're so close up.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost like the point of view of something that's searching for something, hunting or hiding. Definitely. It's very crowded. Yeah. Like there's a lot existing in this space that's all cramped together. Yeah, that's I love all those observations. Now, what were you thinking of as I was reading the text, or if you're rereading it now, what were the things that came to mind? What does it sound like to you? Yes. Definitely reads like notifications, like Facebook notifications, Instagram even. And it also feels like it's not your life, so it feels almost like voyeuristic a little bit. Which I like that comment about the point of view we're seeing this forest at. That also feels almost voyeuristic, like this, we're watching something. Yeah, true. Yeah, it's very third person. It's almost like relentlessly third person. But yeah. Um, so yeah, it definitely feels distracted and distracting. Thinking of that page and what it can do, oops, for us while we're looking at something with a totally different image and text correlation. I would say when we're looking at just the image and text separately, we're not really sure how those things are related, but we're intrigued. Our brain is maybe processing that the imagery is the forest, is a jungle, is nature, that the text reminds us of notifications and of something. But then when we start to pair those things together, when we relate them, that's where kind of the interesting stuff happens. That's just a mock-up of what might be going on in my brain. But what I would argue is that we're always trying to create that alternative narrative to something outside of whatever we're reading, even when the imagery and the text are closely related, even when there isn't imagery, even when it's just text, we're constantly trying to fill in space with our own associations and our own perspectives, our own emotional histories, which is part of the joy of consuming a story or a new work. But there just happens to be a little bit more room to do so when there's a bigger gap between text and image. So that's probably why I love it so much. And I was thinking, I think I'm afraid, or I'm still learning how to use it in my own comics, which is maybe my lifelong lesson, but I do like to try it out, especially in poetry comics, in diary comics, more personal things. I like to try out writing and then pairing it with visuals that maybe aren't correlated right away, but I think that frees me from feeling like I have to get it right exactly what that illustrate my thoughts exactly. I don't know, maybe it's frozen. Oops. Yeah, I find that it can be freeing, and then I often do like the results even more. And I also like to get TAIDMU inspiration from just everywhere, whether that's just mislabeled objects or strange trash juxtapositions, things that I've found. Sometimes advertising has some unintentional TAIDMU that's pretty funny. And yeah, I like to collect some TAIDMU because it's really the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think you could find it anywhere. So it's time to try making our own. All right. So that's the end of the presentation. If you have something to write and draw with handy, I would recommend getting that. I'll give everyone a few minutes. Also, if you just want to stretch or something, to grab a notebook or a piece of, I just have printer paper. Any paper or scrap will do. And if there's nothing handy, you could probably also do this on a device. But I'll let you get that all ready. So we're gonna try TAIDMUing. Oh, perfect. I agree that the breadsticks are one of my least favorite parts of Chex Mix. So we're gonna try TAIDMU 2 different ways. We're going to go image first, and then we're going to go text first. And there's no right way, but it's fun to sort of try different avenues in. So part 1, and it's okay if you're not maybe a drawing forward person. This is all experimental. If you want to draw, you could also create patterns or whatever you feel more comfortable with. I know that Blue Soup is mostly writing focused, so I'm not going to pressure anyone to share their masterpieces, but we're going to start with a drawing. I'm going to use a full 8.5 by 11 piece of paper to do the drawing, but with whatever you're working with, try to fill the page with it. And you can draw something in front of you. You can draw something out the window. I have a few kind of casual prompts that I'll drop in the chat. But we're going to take maybe about 8 minutes, maybe less. Till 4:40 to draw and fill your page. And I'll maybe put on some music in the background. How do we feel about music with drawing? Good, okay. How is the volume? Great. It'll be sort of one image. You can draw multiple things in that image, but it's basically, think of it as one panel. Awesome. And if anyone's joining us who just got in the room, we're drawing on a piece of paper or a notebook page, just filling the whole page. And there's some prompts in the chat. I'll put them back in, but you can also draw whatever you feel. If you see something in front of you, if there's a view out your window, but we're just filling a page with a drawing. We're gonna have about 4 minutes. All right, about 1 more minute. Okay. So I want everyone to drop a phrase into the chat. It can be a sentence that you've come up with. It doesn't have to be a full sentence. It could just be a few words. You can also find maybe a book or anything, an advertisement, a magazine, something that might have words on it, and just stick your finger and find something. But I want us to put at least one phrase into the chat. Awesome. Thanks, Susan. And you could put more than one if you have a few that you'd like to drop in. Okay, give us 10 more seconds to add something into the chat. Ooh. Hmm. Okay. I'm going to give us all a minute to find a phrase from our incredible list of phrases to pair with your drawing. It doesn't have to be the one that fits the best. It can be just whatever feels like it might fit interestingly into your drawing. It could create an entirely new meaning that you didn't originally put in the drawing, but you could also try a few. All right. If anyone's ready to share, I would love to see some TAIDMU, some freshly drafted TAIDMU. Oh, awesome. Here, let's see if I can. Susan, would you mind unmuting and reading?
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe if I talk, I can be the main person.
Awesome.
It's the existential. I think. What does it say? I think I'm an existentialist. I really do.
Susan, I also chose that one. Can you show us the drawing one more time? I just want to get it clear. Awesome. Yeah.
It's like 2 plush toys near me.
That's great. Thanks, Susan. Anyone else want to share?
I'll share mine. It's the drawing's really bad, but so I based this drawing on this photograph, which is, so I was trying to reproduce the photograph, which is something, but I actually, it was interesting to try to draw it. And the text I wrote was, when you approach this home, you will find a beautiful fenced yard with a patio. So there, and that's
beautiful. And kind of, it almost fits exactly what the picture was.
yeah, almost, but they're not. I know, maybe it's too, maybe it's not TAIDMU enough. It was but they're I feel like they look kind of displaced in you know, some kind of migrant status in this
There's
picture.
like TAIDMU in the tone of it.
Yeah. TAIDMU in the tone, right? Tonal disparity.
Corey, I love this gecko. That's beautiful. Awesome. Yeah, feel free to upload in the chat. I really liked all the phrases people found too. Mine was just I did me doing laundry, and I also chose I think I'm an existentialist. I really do, which felt like it fit. Ooh, yes. Philosophical cat. Is that
I
Bucky?
often think about what she thinks of when she stares out the window like that. And
Yeah.
I mean, they say cats are, magical. So I wonder what it is that she thinks about.
I feel like that's not far off. Why? She has wisdom. I know when Chive stares off into the distance, I'm always like, what are you seeing out there? Okay, yeah, Julie and I were on the same wavelength. Cool. So our final activity will be going at it the other way. We're going to start with text first. And you'll see sometimes there are days where it's easier to go in text first. Sometimes it's more freeing to just draw and then figure out the writing. But we'll do a few minutes of free writing, I guess maybe just 4-ish minutes. So at 52, maybe I'll cap it. It'll be a really brief free write. But I do have some prompts, but you could just write about your day. I think that is one of my prompts anyway. And then I have these two sort of kind of silly prompts, but I will ring the bell at 52 for us to stop. But I'll play music in the meantime. gonna give us 30 more seconds. Okay. So I'm gonna get out another piece of paper. I might fold mine into thirds because that's the way I'm thinking about it, but you could just leave your page as is. You could fold it into fourths or not fold it at all. This is just me creating panels for myself. But I'm going to pick a few sentences or phrases from what I just wrote and lay them out in each sort of rectangle I've made. In fact, I might do it this way. If there's just one phrase that you want to work with, you could just do the one. You could pick 4, as many as you want, but you will be pairing drawings with them. So however much you want to draw. But I'm going to pick 3 phrases from what I wrote. I'm going to write them at the top first, or I might move them around a little, but I'm going to write them in each panel just to have them there. And I'm going to draw something in each panel that does not correspond with the sentence. So that'll be a little bit trickier, I think, than going the other way. The one prompt that I do have is that it can't be what sentence you wrote. If you need some visual inspiration, I think sort of like the visual prompts from earlier, whether that is something in front of you, something in the room that you can reference and draw, an animal, a character, something you're familiar with, that could work. Or if you just want to go full opposite direction and and decide to draw something that is totally not in the writing that you did, then you can feel free to do that. It could also be not representational, so it could be abstract shapes or patterns as well. All right. I know this one is cut a little bit short, but in a minute, or if anyone is ready now and wants to share, feel free. It's okay if you're not finished with it yet, but feel free to share your progress. Is anyone ready to share a panel? Julian, is it possible to go over like a minute?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm not sure it's going to show up, but and the drawings are real bad, but let's see. Let's do it another time. How are we going to do it? All right. So the eclipse, life involves a lot of sobbing, people watching the eclipse, and some reasons to cry. And then namaste. I can't seem to stop crying.
Wow. I love life involves a lot of crying.
Sobbing, I think.
Sobbing. I concur. I think you're making, what is it for? What will you do with it? Wow. That's awesome. I love that, Corey.
I can't see it yet.
I like the abstraction of the eclipse glasses too, where it's like, I know what those are, but I'm also like, what are these shapes, these frames? Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's great, Cecilia. How vast the universe is. Just a big exclamation point there. Awesome.
Great.
Anyone else want to share? You can also just keep it for yourself. For me, it's my, I got loosey-goosey, but I did a list of things that make me feel better. Seeing flowers bloom while listening to Enya.
Oh, yay.
Clicking the electric kettle. Doing a little dance. And they're all just dancing, but
I'll share mine. It's so I wrote about the eclipse, but then I looked at cars out my window, but I didn't draw very good cars. So I have a car, a truck, and that's supposed to be a trolley. And it says, we are baking, and then we needed jackets. Planets emerged. A lone crow winged quickly home. That's
Ooh. Okay, but I like that TAIDMU where I'm thinking of birds and nature, but seeing automobile. All right.
yeah,
Wow.
the automobiles became characters. They were sort of like, they were kind of, I didn't know if they were witnesses or contradictions of it sort of worked as both.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're at the end of the session. Thank you so much for joining me on this text and image mismatch journey. And I hope you continue to make comics or just small drawn stories. If that was your first time, I know we have some pretty established cartoonists already in this chat, in this room, but thank you so much for joining me, and I had a really great time.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you again to Cathy and to everyone who participated in today's session. I'm just now sharing some links in the chat. You can learn more about Blue Stoop's programs. You can participate in a survey about how nice today's session was. Tell Cathy what a great job she did. You can send a few bucks to Blue Stoop if you feel so inclined. And also, we've got some upcoming events. So on the 16th, there'll be the Bricks reading series at the Head in the Hand bookstore. And a couple days after that, a week from today, I'll be Thursdays on the Stoop with Davey Pine, looking at layering emotions. So definitely click on those links, check it out, maybe sign up for one of our upcoming classes. There's, I think, 4 more this semester, so definitely worth looking into that. There is financial aid available. Thank you again for being here, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.